Snow came down like shattered glass over the Red River Plains that night. The wind howled through the valley, sweeping across the broken fences and ghostly wagons that dotted the frozen land. Most folks had taken shelter long before sunset, but one man rode through the storm, his silhouette barely visible against the white blur, a lone cowboy named Luke Carver. His hat was pulled low, his coat soaked through, and his horse was running on willpower more than strength. Luke had been a drifter for years, a man who carried silence like a second skin. He'd lost too much, his land, his woman, and his reason to stay in one place. That night he wasn't looking for anyone, but fate doesn't ask permission. As he crossed a bend near an old wagon trail, his horse halted and let out a nervous snort. Luke squinted through the wind. Something was moving ahead, small, slow, staggering. He dismounted and trudged forward, boots sinking deep into the snow. Then he saw them, a boy no older than 10, holding on to an older woman who had collapsed beside a broken wagon. Her gray hair was dusted with frost, her face pale as the moonlight. Luke dropped to his knees. "Ma'am, you hear me?" he asked, his voice rough but gentle. The woman's lips trembled. "Please." "My grandson. He's cold." The boy clung to her, shivering, eyes wide with fear. "Grandma, please don't leave me." Luke didn't think twice. He lifted the woman into his arms, her frail weight barely a burden to his calloused hands. "There's an old cabin just over that ridge," he said. "Hold on, both of you." The storm clawed at his back as he carried them through the snow. His horse followed close behind, its breath steaming in the cold. The cabin came into view, half-broken old timber walls, but it was shelter. Luke kicked the door open and laid the woman on the cot near the fire pit. The boy huddled close as Luke struck a match and lit a small flame. The warmth flickered weakly at first, then grew, filling the room with a soft orange glow. Luke removed his coat and wrapped it around the boy. "Name's Luke Carver," he said. "You got a name, son?" The boy nodded. "Eli. And this is my grandma, Martha." Luke looked at the woman, her breathing shallow but steady. "She'll be fine once the fever breaks." As the fire grew, Luke sat against the wall watching the two sleep. Outside, the wind screamed across the plains, but inside the only sound was the crackle of burning wood. For the first time in years, the cowboy wasn't alone. Morning came soft and gray. Snow had piled against the door, but the storm had passed. Luke stepped outside, his boots crunching the ice, and fed the horse. The land stretched endless before him, white, silent, and cruelly beautiful. When he returned, the woman was awake. "You saved us," she said weakly. "We were traveling east. Got caught in the storm." Luke poured her a cup of water. "Lucky I was passing through." She smiled faintly. "Lucky for us, not for you. You look like a man trying to disappear." Luke didn't answer. He'd heard words like that before, and each one cut deeper than a knife. Days passed. Luke hunted rabbits, chopped firewood, and kept the fire alive. Eli followed him everywhere, mimicking his every move. The boy's laughter slowly filled the cabin, something Luke hadn't heard in years. The woman, too, began to regain strength, her voice soft but full of gratitude. "You remind me of my late husband," she said one night as they sat by the fire. "Quiet, but with a heart you try to hide." Luke gave a small, weary smile. "Hiding's easier than losing." She nodded. "But sometimes what we hide is exactly what someone else needs." Her words lingered. That night Luke dreamed of his past, the ranch he'd lost to greedy men, the family he never got to build. He woke before dawn, staring into the dying embers of the fire. Something inside him had begun to thaw slowly, painfully like ice giving way to spring. One morning Eli came running in, holding something wrapped in an old cloth. "Mr. Carver, look what I found." Inside the cloth were gold coins, heavy, shining, stamped with a crest Luke didn't recognize. "Where'd you get these?" Luke asked sharply. "In Grandma's chest," Eli said innocently. "She said not to touch, but I wanted to show you." Luke turned toward the woman. She looked uneasy. We had a small estate back east," she explained quietly. "My husband owned land more than we could manage. But when he passed, people came for it. We ran. I wanted to keep Eli safe." Luke's eyes softened. "And you ended up out here in the middle of nowhere." She nodded. "Sometimes hiding is all that's left." Luke didn't press further. He understood that kind of running. The kind that came from pain, not fear. That evening, as the fire glowed low, the sound of distant hooves echoed through the hills. Luke stiffened. He knew that rhythm. the slow, deliberate pace of armed riders. He stood, grabbed his rifle, and motioned for the boy to stay quiet. Through the window, he saw 3 riders dismounting near the wagon. Their shadows stretched long against the snow. One of them shouted, "We know you're in there, Martha. Hand over the chest and maybe we'll let you live." Eli clutched his grandmother, trembling. Martha's face went pale. Luke's jaw tightened. "You know these men?" She nodded slowly. "They followed us from the estate. They're after our gold." Luke checked his rifle, the barrel cold in his hands. He'd spent years avoiding trouble, keeping his head low, but something about that trembling boy and the frail woman behind him pulled him back, into the fire he once swore to leave behind. He turned to them. "Stay low. Don't move until I say." The first bullet shattered the window. Glass flew across the cabin. Luke dropped to his knees and fired back. One shot, clean and true. A man screamed and fell into the snow. The others ducked behind their horses, returning fire. The cabin filled with smoke and splinters. Eli covered his ears, crying, while Martha prayed under her breath. Luke rolled to the doorway, aimed, and fired again. Another man dropped. The last rider cursed, mounted his horse, and fled into the distance. Silence returned, heavy and cold. Luke lowered his rifle and exhaled. His hands shook, but his eyes stayed sharp. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now." Martha looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "You didn't have to do that." Luke shrugged. "Guess I did." Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The land looked calm again, as if the storm had passed not just from the sky, but from Luke's heart. He helped them rebuild the wagon, repaired the wheels, and packed their few belongings. But as they prepared to leave, Martha took his hand. "You've done more for us than you'll ever know," she said. "And when this is over, when we're home again, we won't forget you." Luke smiled faintly, looking down at the boy. "Take care of your grandma, Eli." Eli's eyes shimmered. "Will we see you again, Mr. Carver?" Luke hesitated. "Maybe. The world's smaller than it looks." As they rode away, Luke stood watching them until they vanished into the white horizon. He didn't know who they really were, or that the woman he'd saved was one of the richest landowners in the territory. All he knew was that for the first time in years, he'd done something that mattered. He mounted his horse, turned toward the dying sun, and rode on. The lonely cowboy who once had nothing had unknowingly changed his fate forever, and somewhere beyond the plains, destiny was waiting to repay the debt he never asked for.